Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Recruit Military Live, a series of live broadcasts covering all things military transition, veteran employment, mil-spouse employment, and much, much more. My name is Lucas Connolly, retired U.S. Army officer and former TAP program manager, here to help you to navigate the turbulent waters of transitioning from military service to a civilian career. If you're in search of meaningful employment, well, you're in the right place. Please visit us at rmvets.com/live to learn more. Okay, folks, let's roll. Are you transitioning from military service to the great big scary world of civilian employment? Are you completely unsure what your next mission is? Deciding what to do on the right-hand side of that DD-214 can be tough. Do I go to school, look for a full-time job, or do I bet it all on starting my own business? It's a hard decision. It's tough. Our guest today is here to help you navigate your way through that decision-making process. Today's guest is an absolute pleasure to have. She's an executive coach, personal branding consultant, and a reputation management expert. Before starting her own business, she spent 20 years in marketing, public relations, and business development. Since 2008, she's been helping support professional success at the individual level, helping hundreds of clients and thousands of audience members gain a fresh perspective on how to craft their own personal brand. She's an award-winning author, an executive coach, and an in-demand speaker. She's been on had her own Lida TEDx talk, 5 best-selling books, and numerous courses on LinkedIn Learning that showcase her empowering style. In the military community, she has dedicated countless hours of her time helping veterans create their personal brands and build meaningful civilian careers, as well as authoring 3 of her books about veterans in the workplace. In addition to her professional pursuits, she has made it her personal mission to give back to those who have served. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming the one and only Lida Citroën.
Thank you so much. Hi, nice to see you. Thank you so much for having me.
Such a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for taking time out to join us today.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
All right, folks out there in LinkedIn land, now that you know who we are, we want to hear who you are. Hit that chat window. Let us know where you're watching from, who you are, who you're with, who you served with, what your status is, National Guard, active duty, reserve component, retired, or some other status that I haven't thought of. As we're going through the broadcast today, feel free to jump into the chat with your questions, comments, issues, or concerns. Time allowing, we will address them. All right, folks, strap in because we got wheels up. Lida, many of us joined the service at a very young age with no idea what we wanted to do with our lives. We had no sense of direction, no sense of purpose. We probably had a parent behind us telling us to figure it out because you're not going to live here for the rest of your life. So many of us headed into the military service and we found a career, a sense of purpose, and a sense of direction. When the ride is over, so to speak, many of us are left feeling without direction, hanging up the uniform and not, feeling much the same way we did so many years prior. No sense of purpose, no sense of direction. What advice do you give to someone who's very rapidly approaching that ETS, retirement, or EAOS date and has no idea what they're going to do next?
Well, first, I'm seeing the chat come in and some very familiar names are in there. And I see a lot of folks saying that they're currently serving or they're retired or have transitioned out. And to everyone who has been in the military, been married to someone in the military, had a child or a spouse or a parent or grandparent who has served, thank you for my freedom. Thank you for your choice to serve our great nation. Have to start with that. Being a civilian and not having had the commitment to military service that the men and women I work with have, it's only something I can answer based on the thousands of conversations I've had. What you're describing, that sense of loss, confusion, makes perfect sense. If you think about what it takes to serve in the military, and since the 70s, it's been a volunteer military here in the US, that's a choice somebody made, whether it was a family business, right? Because everybody served, or whether you were the first one in your family to make that commitment. There was a choice to serve your country. We know that there are a lot of reasons somebody does that, but it's still a choice. And so making that commitment, that choice in the first place is significant. But then you think about what happens during military service. Typically, as you said, a lot of people join the military young. So you're becoming an adult in this culture that is so vastly different from the civilian. right? As simple as the rules and the standards and the systems in the military are set, they're understood, they're followed. Civilian world, we got no rules, right? I mean, we got guidelines, but let's face it, from company to company, industry to industry, everything changes. So there isn't that set of, prescribed rules and standards that makes it easy. There's a language difference between the military culture
True.
and the civilian. But I think to answer the question about where do you start, it's to understand that philosophically there's a commitment difference. That choice to serve really is about putting something, a mission, your country ahead of yourself. And so it makes perfect sense that when you're leaving the military and all of us around you are going, thank you for your service, the world is your oyster, go choose what you want, that's going to feel really different because it's not been about you. Service before self, which is a core military value, says it's not about focusing on your goals and your recognition and your status in the military. You're supposed to be focused on those around you. How do you take that with you into a civilian environment where that doesn't play, right? We can have our own agenda. We can think differently. So I would say that the first thing I would acknowledge is that it's a very normal experience to be confused about what comes next. Take the values that make the most sense and recognize that most of the people I talk to are looking for something meaningful. So it's more than a paycheck. The paycheck might be what they lead with, but they want to know at the end of the day when they go home, just like they did for however long they served, that they're going home and feeling a sense of pride and accomplishment. It doesn't matter if you're manning phone banks for a call center or you're, a politician. Having a sense of purpose and meaning is what probably brought you into the military, and it can be there when you come out of the military.
So it almost seems like it's a matter of identifying for yourself what gives you meaning, what gives you purpose individually, as opposed to what's been prescribed to you by a mission set or a manual or a professional development roadmap that's been put in front. You almost need to go through kind of an existential discovery of what your values are and what your lifelong goals are.
Oh, absolutely. And a lot of the mentoring calls that I do or the coaching will start off with, I need to find a job. So what are some good career options? And you're absolutely right. I will answer that question, but let's start a little bit before that question. What gave you joy in the military and the sense of service, the sense of pageantry, maybe the tradition of the military? Maybe it was the routine. Maybe it was working outside or working inside. Like, where does your joy come from? And that might sound fluffy, but we're talking about the rest of your career now. So why not find something that you're happy with? The money is not the hard part. Finding money isn't hard. Finding what you're passionate about and what gives you joy is really hard. So why not start with the hardest part? And then we look at the skills. So you love to cook, you love to bake. Let's say you were a cook in the Navy. Do you have the skills? Do you have a culinary background? Are you trained in a certain type of, cuisine? Are there skills there? If you love to bake and it brings you joy, but you don't have any training, if that's what's going to be needed, then we can look at what the opportunities and resources are. But starting with what brings you joy, what are the skills, and then trying to match those together with what the market opportunity is. So if your passion is developing 35 millimeter film, might be kind of hard to find work doing that because we don't use it. But let's find those opportunities in the career fields that will build on what brings you the most happiness, where you have the skills and you can find a valuable career going forward that gives you that meaning.
Absolutely. All right, let's explore some of the possibilities here. Now let's imagine for a second that I'm a E4 specialist, 13 Bravo, which in the Army is a field artillery cannon crew member. I've decided to separate after a single term of service. I'm short on transferable skills. Firing cannons is not exactly something you can do in the civilian sector. And people just keep telling me, hey, man, you got to go to school. You got to go to school. You got to go to school. I barely made it out of high school. I don't know anything about college. I have no idea where to start. Where do I even begin?
Well, again, I would back up from that being the obvious, and it might be, but there are a lot of careers where you don't need a college education. So let's look at, did you enjoy firing cannons? There's skill involved, right? It's not you're trained for that. So you're already predisposed to training. You've learned precision. You've learned accountability. You've learned resilience and adaptability. These are core skills that you're already bringing into the workforce. Yeah, there's not a huge corporate need for people to fire cannons. Got it. I work with a lot of snipers. Same thing. Not a big demand in the corporate world. But what are the skills that you bring, and what is it about that kind of work that you enjoy? School can be a fabulous choice, but for the right reasons. And I always go back to, what is the real reason? If it's just to get a degree because you think that gives you a job, let's rethink that. If the kind of work that you want to do doesn't require a college degree or the kind of training that you would get in college, is it the right commitment to make for that amount of time? If it is the right commitment to make, then what are the career opportunities going to look like after that? Veterans today have the wonderful opportunity to take advantage of GI Bill funds, post-GI Bill funds, and that's fabulous. But it shouldn't be a stopgap. And I talk to a lot of folks who say, I don't know what I want to do, so I'll just use the money and I'll go get some education and maybe I'll figure it out. That's how we end up with a lot of art history majors who can't find a job afterwards. And there's nothing wrong with art history. It's fabulous, but have a vision for it. And if the vision is the kind of work I want to do requires a college education or requires a degree in political science or economics or something like that, then you know what the goal is, and education supports that goal.
This is more a matter of figuring out where you're going and then what education is going to support you along that path.
Yeah. And I understand there's a confusion when you say, where are you going? Because they may not know, right? So let's just find a direction. Let's just find a direction. We don't have to know what the job is that you're pursuing, but what's the direction? Is it computer sciences? Is it healthcare? Is it public speaking? Is it coaching? Like, what would you ultimately enjoy doing? That's a lucrative business opportunity. And then what are the things that we need to get you from here to make that happen? And if education is one, which in a lot of cases it is, then what are the kinds of courses you need to take? Where would you be best served getting a degree from? Because all institutions are not the same. They all have different brands, different opportunities, different support networks. A lot of college campuses and universities now have Student Veterans of America chapters, and I've done a lot of work with SVA over the years. Many of you know me from that. Is that sense of community going to be important to you on campus? Like, it's not a one size fits all when it comes to which institution to pick. Oop. I think we lost your audio for a second. There we go.
There we go. You got to love a live broadcast. Technical problems just come whenever they feel like it. I like that you touched on, not really having it all nailed down as to what exactly you want to do, because a lot of people get hung up on a job title. So I want to go be a project manager, or I want to go be a operations manager. When in many cases that's temporary. That's not a finish line. It's a start point within an industry or a field of employment that you may want to grow in. And getting kind of stuck on that job title as a finish line can lead you into a career field that you might not necessarily want to be in.
As you say that, I'm chuckling because I remember a few years ago coaching an F-15E fighter pilot. And boy, the one time I left the E off of that, I heard why it's an F-15E. And his whole goal was to get the CEO title. That was all he talked about. And as much as we would navigate the conversation around his passions and what he was good at and where his network was well connected, he kept saying, I just want the CEO title. I said, here's what you do this afternoon. Set up an LLC. with the Secretary of State of your state where you were living. Go ahead and register a business name. Call yourself a CEO, print up business cards. You can have that done by 5 p.m.
Yep.
You got the title, right? I mean, the title isn't what you're chasing, it's what comes with that. And let's really unpack what that looks like. And the more we talked about it, CEO wasn't the role that he would be best suited for. CFO in an organization of a certain type, in a certain industry, was his sweet spot. But all he had that laser focus on CEO. So yeah, you can have that done by 5 o'clock tonight if you want.
This is true. I see a lot of CEOs there on LinkedIn and in a company with 2 employees. But that's a topic for another time. Okay, so we've talked about education.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like it really is about where you're going and education as a tool to help you get there. If you want to be a CEO, that art history major might not help you. But again, we could expand upon that forever. Let's imagine a different scenario.
Okay.
Right? Let's say I'm leaving the military after 10 years of service. I've got 2 school-aged children at home and a third on the way, so I can't exactly head on off to North Carolina State full time. I've got to put some money in the bank.
Mm-hmm.
I know that after I hang up the boots, I've got to get a job. My family's counting on me, and quite frankly, the weight of the responsibility is weighing on me like a ton of bricks. I've never had to fill out a job application before. I've never written a resume. I've never had a job interview. I don't know where to begin. What advice do you give?
Again, just sort of framing the scenario as the classic normal, if you will, environment that most people find themselves in takes a little bit of the pressure off, right? You didn't do anything wrong to be in this situation. And I would almost caution you as you look to the person on both sides who has it all locked up. They have a job, secured. Everything looks like it's just golden. Check with them in 6 months, because a lot of folks, as they approach that ETS date, are choosing whatever comes along,
Right.
Just to take the pressure off, just to have that anxiety go away. I would
Guilty.
Yeah.
I did exactly that.
What a lot of people do. And then in 6 months or a year, you wake up going, what am I doing? I'm not passionate about this. I don't care about this mission. I don't like the people I work with. I hate whatever it is. You wake up and realize it was a wrong choice. Then we got to figure out what to do next. And that's a very different situation. But to the person facing an employment question, I would start breaking it down into what are the non-negotiables, right? I talk about that in the book, Success After Service. What are the things you need? So if you've got 2+ children, you probably need healthcare. Maybe one of your children has special needs. And so you need access to certain medical facilities or systems. What is your family looking for? Is there a specific place that you want to be located? Are there jobs there, or are you going to be looking for remote work, right? Start looking at the non-negotiables. And income is partly a non-negotiable, right? We need income, but the income we think we deserve versus the income that we're capable of is sometimes where it gets a little fuzzy. So make a list of all the things that are non-negotiable. Then make a list of all the things you love to do and could imagine doing. And I love to brainstorm that with clients. Sometimes we come up with wild ideas they never even thought about. And yeah, a big percentage of those aren't feasible, but it's fun to brainstorm that.
Right.
But then make a list of what you don't want to do. So if cleaning up after the elephants at the zoo is like your idea of a horrible job, then put that on the list. Like what you're doing is you're starting to take control over what comes next. You're not in the position of vulnerable or victim, right? I'll just take anything, but you're actually doing it strategically. So what are your non-negotiables? What would you love? What would be amazing to do? And what would you absolutely hate doing, right? Maybe it's working with children or working outside all day or working indoors all day. What are the things you would hate to do? Then let's look at what's the opportunity. So if virtual or working remote or even in a hybrid situation isn't possible in the community that you're in with the companies that are there, then we have to look at companies that are physically located near where you're going to be. Who are they? Are they big companies? Are they small companies? If your idea of working in a corporate bureaucracy sounds terrible, maybe you don't look at some of the bigger companies, because that's what you're going to find. And it's got its pluses and its minuses, right? But you start breaking it down and creating a strategy. Once you get to the point where you say, these are 4 companies that definitely have the kind of work I'm looking for, they're definitely hiring, they're hiring people like me, then it's about, let's figure out how to approach that. Do you know people that work there? Do you know people who used to work there who can coach you into that opportunity? Do you have the skills? Do you need a college degree, right? Do you need additional skills? Can you up level your experience base? Those are the next questions. And then finally, how do we connect the dots? That's the last step. The first step is not throwing a resume at them.
Right.
Because once you've gone through all that process, your resume looks very different. Your LinkedIn profile looks very different. All of the marketing that you're going to do to position yourself to be attractive looks very different once you've done all this research and homework. It's a lot of process.
And I love what you said about, brainstorming the possibilities, because, every once in a while I'll talk to somebody and I'll say, well, what is it you want to do when you get out of the service? And they say, well, I want to make $100,000. And I said, no, you don't want to make $100,000. What do you mean? Yeah, I just told you I want to make $100,000. No, think of money as a tool. You don't want to make $100,000. You want to take your kids to Disney every year. You want to send your children to private school. You want to have a college account set up for them. You'd like to be able to take 14 or 30 days off every year. You'd like to live in a nice neighborhood in a big house with a backyard and some Cocker Spaniels around. These are the life conditions that you visualize for yourself that $100,000 enables. So let's not get hung up on that dollar, and let's, like you said, figure out, where do you want to live? What kind of environment do you want to work in? What kind of things do you define as success?
Yeah. And it's interesting, money is, I think, almost the easiest thing to point to, because it equals certain things. But keep in mind, as you exit the military, things are going to cost a lot more, right? And that's a shock to a lot of people, even those retiring out of the military, is all of a sudden the things you didn't pay for before, you're paying for now. So be realistic about what the money looks like. And what's the cost to doing work that you're not passionate about, or that you really don't care about, or that causes moral conflict? Because there's a high cost to that. So you might earn $100,000, but if you have to work for a company whose values don't align with yours, where you're asked to compromise on the morals that you believe in, and I'm not saying that's a lot, but it can happen, is that $100,000 really worth it? Or could you have taken the job for 70 and done work where you're thriving and found yourself much happier? And because you're happier, you're doing better work, and therefore you're getting promoted. And within a couple of years, you're at that 100,000, but you're also doing work that motivates you, that inspires you.
I can tell you from experience that a large paycheck does not make up for the fact that you hate your job.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, and I can't say it's not worth it, but I've been in those jobs too. And you do start wondering, is this really all there is? Yeah, that's hard.
Show up on
Especially
Monday, punch a clock, pay,
Yeah.
cash a check, do it all again the next week.
When you're coming from an environment that is so mission focused, where everyone around you would take a bullet for you. And now you're in an environment you don't enjoy. Maybe there's internal strife and bureaucracy and things that'll make you question a lot of things. So it's not just about the money.
You're absolutely right. Okay, let's take a turn here for a second and take a look at the third option. Let's imagine, if you would, that I'm a service member leaving the military who has always admired self-made millionaires. Other people have posters of sports heroes on the walls, but I've got a picture of Steve Jobs and Elon Musk right there next to my bed. And I read Forbes magazine and Money and Entrepreneur, and I've always dreamed of being my own boss, of owning my own business. Is the dream of being a business owner, an entrepreneur, of owning my own business, is it really feasible? Is it hard? Is it a pipe dream? Am I just fooling myself and I should just go get a straight job? I mean, I've heard people get out of the military before me say, I'm going to start my own business. they've risen, they've fallen. I don't know if it's worth risking. What advice would you give?
I would say it's all of the above. I'm kind of what you call an accidental entrepreneur. I had never wanted to own my own business. I spent 20 years in a corporate environment where, a paycheck was auto deposited every 2 weeks. I had personal time off. I had an office somebody else paid for and paid to have it cleaned. I never was that person who wanted to have their own business. But when the crash happened in 2008, and everyone around me, including myself, found ourselves unemployed, I started going through the mechanics of finding another job and doing all the things that we had always done. But it was actually my husband who said, why don't you figure out what you're really passionate about and then go figure out how to do that? And it just stopped me in my tracks because I had always been chasing title and money and the things that most people chase. But when he asked me that, I realized there were aspects of what I had done that I really enjoyed. And there were a lot of pieces that I didn't. So I started crafting my own job description. And as I was crafting this job description, I realized that it didn't exist working for someone else. And that's what led me to wanting to be a business owner. It is a different lifestyle. It is uncertain. It is thrilling. It's fearful. It's all of these emotions bottled into one title called business owner. What I would say is a lot of the people I talk to who talk about entrepreneurship first say, I don't want to work for someone else. I don't want to work for the man. So my motivation is I don't want to work for someone else. That's tricky because you are working for someone else as a business owner. You're working for your customers. You're working for your clients, your investors, your accountant. You're accountable. And if you have staff, you are working for someone else. The second one I hear, and this one almost makes me giggle, is I want job security. Well, tell me how that works out.
With as many businesses that fail every year, that might be the wrong path to go if you're looking for job security.
Well, the idea is that I'm betting on myself and I'll figure it out no matter what. Well, there's no such thing as job security, whether you work for someone else or you work for yourself. So let's bust that myth. It doesn't exist. But if it's a lifestyle choice, that almost starts to make more sense because there are lifestyle advantages to having your own business. I can go out in the middle of the day and get my nails done and I don't have to tell somebody, right? But that might mean that I'm working over the weekend or I'm working at night. So I'm accountable to myself and my business, but I have a different lifestyle. I can work from anywhere. So there's advantages, there's flexibility in how you spend your money, all this stuff. That's a good motivation, as well as if you have a great idea, you have a business idea. If you're pursuing a franchise model, which works for a lot of people because a lot of the marketing and the product and the support is already built in. You just have to have the money to buy into a franchise and know enough about business. So there's a lot of things that go into entrepreneurship. And one of the things I love to share with veterans is the statistics about how well somebody coming from the military, and I'd put military spouses in this category as well, sets you up for success as an entrepreneur. The businesses that survive, a lot of them are run by prior military. If you think about the skills that the military teaches, reliability, accountability, perseverance, discipline, right? All of that, leadership, that's what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Whether you're a franchise owner, you're a solopreneur, or you have a team, you have to have a lot of the skills and the qualities that the military teaches. So it can be a fabulous option for someone who's got the environment to make that happen.
That sounds awesome. Now, if I feel like I've got that good idea, I think the biggest thing that scares me is financing. And where does the money? I look at my bank account, I don't see $500,000. I'd like to see $500,000. That would be fantastic. That would make my Wednesday, but it's not there. Where can I get capitalized? Are there programs? Are there options? Do I go in a bank and just say, hey, I've got a great idea. Give me $500,000?
Yeah. Let me know how that works. Well, and sometimes money can work against you, right? Sometimes not having a big client to start with or not having a puffy bank account gives you that edge to really make you work hard enough to make it happen. So sometimes it can work against you to have that kind of resource. But I would say, yes, there are definitely programs from Bunker Labs, which has many different setups to help guide veterans through the entrepreneurship programs. The IVMF, which is the Institute of Veterans and Military Families out of Syracuse University. I've done a lot of work with them for a lot of years. They have all different programs. Rosie Network. The VA actually has a conduit and a portal that you can go through the VA and find access to Small Business Administration funding or alternative government programs. There's so much out there. Sometimes it feels like too much, but there are a lot of resources to find that funding. If you go to a bank or you go to an investor or any of these, they're going to want a business plan. So more than I've got a great idea and I need some money, they're going to need to see how that money is going to be spent. What's the return on that investment? What's the timetable? How do you value the company? All of that business stuff has to be there too.
Awesome. So we've kind of gone over three courses of action, but I got a feeling that really there's a possibility that these are not just three pipelines. Is there crossover? Are there modified ways? Is there overlap? Are there combination plans that work?
Absolutely. So you're not going to be in school forever. And maybe you're not at a position where you're right to be an entrepreneur today. What I love to do, again, if we're focusing on direction, and let's say somebody comes to me and says, I really want to be a business owner. I have no idea where to start. Maybe going to school and getting a business degree is a good place to learn about the environment that you want to work in, or getting some certification and some credentialing in computer sciences or in healthcare or whatever industry you want to own a business in. That's where we start staggering. So if we've got the goal and the goal is business ownership, what do we need to do from today until we can launch that business? Employment might be an option. Let's say you want to own a marketing company one day. It would really help if you worked for some marketing companies. So maybe you go get your degree and then you work for a few years for some different marketing agencies, and then you're ready to start your business. So whatever the order is, if you have that sense of direction, I see myself, working as a consultant for one of the big consulting firms. Okay. Would it help to have been an entrepreneur before doing that? So you can show that sense of responsibility and how you grew the company. And that's where you start staggering the three to make the most sense for you. That would always be my advice.
And that makes sense. And I had a conversation with a young transitioning service member once who said he wanted to start his own restaurant. And I said, okay, well, what can you tell me about tax law? And he just kind of stared at me. I said, well, you're going to run a business. I understand. Look, you may know how to make a great steak. You may not know how to plate scallops like you were on a Gordon Ramsay TV show. But somebody in your business is going to be doing the taxes. Who's that going to be? And you might want to figure that out before you wager your future on this business model. So I can completely appreciate that idea of layering and building all the skills you need, whether it comes from education, employment, or entrepreneurship, to lead you in the direction of where your goal is.
Yeah. And if you have that sense of direction, right, then taking a job that might be a little less than what you're ultimately capable of, at least you're doing it with the notion that you're basically in school learning on the job and getting a paycheck. So if you're that family that you can't afford to go to school full time, getting a job in a restaurant or in a restaurant management company, to use your example, it might feel a little below you, but you're not doing it because you're not qualified for anything else. You're doing it because you're getting experience and training so that when you start your restaurant, you've got the skills. It's a way of stacking your career so you don't feel like you're settling or you're taking less than. It's intentional. It's strategic. And that puts you back in control.
That makes total sense. And I think the biggest takeaway that I'm having from this conversation is you've got to define where it is you're going, where you want to be before you decide how you're going to get there. And I think a lot of people, they just get that, they see that 50-meter target. I'm just going to go to school, or, you know what, I need to find a job. And they haven't thought through where they want to be 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now, what retirement looks like, what they envision as success. So this makes a lot of sense to me.
Excellent. Great.
All right. So last question before we wrap it up. Same question I ask of all of my guests. If you had a transitioning service member with you in an elevator, that typical 30-second of opportunity to impart a piece of advice to them as they get ready to plot their post-military path, 30 seconds or less, what advice would you give?
I would say first, this is all about you now. It's not about your platoon or your squadron or your company. It's all about you and your family. So it's okay to think about what you need and what you want. This is your career. You're not accountable to your CO, or people aren't watching you the way that they did in the military. So figure out what makes you happy. As I said earlier, it is so easy to find the money. And I don't mean that lightly, but finding out what makes you happy, doing work that is fulfilling and meaningful and brings you joy, that is hard to find. So figure that piece out first. The money follows. And I would, of course, say thank you for your service.
Awesome. Lida, thank you so very much. Before we
Absolutely.
sign off, tell them a little bit about the books.
So my first book that I wrote for the military is called Your Next Mission. It is still a bestseller in the military space because it really is about finding your brand, figuring out how you're going to position yourself. At the very end, we talk about things like resumes, because the process to get to a resume is much bigger than writing out your skills or your job experience. But a couple of years ago, I was approached by a publisher who said, what we really need in the market is a how-to book. How do you exit the military? So Success After Service is that book. It talks about if you're 18, 24 months out from separation, what are the things you need to be thinking about? And it is the only book that really looks at those three paths that we talked about: employment, education, and entrepreneurship as options. So two of the books that I'm really proud of. My third military book is written for employers who hire a lot of veterans. But I just, again, really appreciate this opportunity to share the wisdom and the knowledge I've gained in the last 14 years and to be in front of the men and women who have served. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you. And thank you for your time. And folks out there, if you haven't already done so, if you have decided that employment is the direction you need to go to, take a few minutes and head over to www.recruitmilitary.com, where you'll find over 400,000 job opportunities for more than 16,000 employers. We at Recruit Military are on a mission to help veterans, transitioning service members, and male spouses find meaningful employment opportunities. Lida, on behalf of Recruit Military and the folks that joined us today, thank you so very much for your time being on the show today.
Well, thank you, Lucas, and thank you to Recruit Military for bringing me back again. It's always a pleasure.
Awesome. And for those of you who have become a fan of the show, be sure to tune in next for our next show on August 30th, when Gabby and Raul will be hosting Lieutenant Colonel Ismael Ortiz Rivera from the U.S. Army's Soldier for Life program. We hope to see you then. This has been Lucas Connolly for Recruit Military. Until next time, good luck and Godspeed.